let's say that the first topic that we will be referring to is the access to funding. And first of all, we need to be aware of the fact that we are representing today more advanced ecosystems, Western countries, where the access to funding should be easy, abundant, let's say, and more advanced with respect to emerging ecosystems. We've already had a first roundtable that focused on the southern and eastern ecosystems. There will be two other roundtables, one focused on Nordic and Baltic ecosystems, and a final one, to which we will be pleased to have you again, focused on the best ways to connect all the ecosystems based on the results of the three previous sessions. So the first question that I would like to address to our speakers is what are the access to funding conditions in your ecosystems? How do you perceive them? Can startups usually raise funds in an easy way, or there are gaps at specific, let's say, growth stages or on specific technologies or sectors? Maybe Jana, since at EuroQuity you have a very broad view of these issues.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I would like to answer maybe broadly in French ecosystem. I think it's not so so difficult because, as I at the beginning, as I said, Bpifrance is as well investor. So we are investing in French ecosystem, in French companies from very early stage until really the big one, Series B and beyond. So I don't think so that it is so difficult in our ecosystem, in French ecosystem. What I can see when I cooperated EuroQuity with internationally, it is problem, of course, especially in the public funding is for very early stage or very small funding, and then there is very difficult to find private investors in certain countries. So it's very important the support of accelerators and incubators, and as well another governmental public organization. They can help them to make connections, to make a introduction with relevant investors, because it is the main problem what we can see in a lot of countries in Europe, and as well in Africa, but especially in Europe. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe also the mission of EuroQuity is to be a one-stop shop for investors and startups. I don't know if you can give a few details about the services that you offer.
Exactly. This is what we are doing on the EuroQuity. This is the matchmaking platform for connection between startups and investors, and as well during our work with different projects, we have from very early stage companies, support for very early stage companies. For example, we organize the investor office hours for the first feedback and first introduction, the companies with investors, and then Series C, Series A in different projects. And of course, we have AEC scaling up project. It's already finished, but it was the pilot project for DeepTech companies in Series B and C. And now we will continue in this project in Scale Up 100. We will support 100 European DeepTech companies to find finance.
Thank you so much, Jana. Maybe Jem, since you are also directly concerned about this issue, can you give us an overview of the condition in Netherlands and the other ecosystems that you are covering, and in particular your role and the challenges and gaps that you can see?
Yeah, okay, thanks for reformulating the question. Sorry, I was in a call, so I couldn't follow the beginning. So on my side, a few things, depending on the geographical scope, and also depending on the quality of the startups, to be fully honest. So if you look at the energy landscape, starting with the Netherlands, you've got plenty of support from some regional agencies. So according to the provinces, you can actually get some support quite easily. Same goes with some innovation loans. So I would say that at the moment, the Netherlands is actually quite advanced in that sense. If we compare it, for example, with the UK, we can also see that the risk is actually reduced for investors because of some tax incentives compared to other countries. So on our side, when we do invest in the UK, we tend to see valuations and funding going up quite easily because private investors have, let's say, more tax incentives compared to other countries in Europe. This is something we need to take into account just for our own risk management. And last but not least, I was talking about the quality of startups, which really plays a role on our side. At least at Rockstart, we sometimes need to fight almost with other VCs to step in rounds for some promising startups. And I can really see this type of trend, at least on the energy side. We don't really see the impact of the turbulences in the private markets, usually because the funds have some lots of dry powder if they have raised before COVID or in the last few years. So now they have capital available, and the climate tech space is actually quite crowded compared to maybe agri-food, where we have a bit more leverage in our discussions.
Thank you. It's a little bit surprising because, as Jana mentioned, so in the scope of the EIC Accelerator, for example, where they select the best startups across Europe and also offer an equity investment through the EIB, EIF, in many cases, they are facing challenges to find the lead investor and co-investors. So probably, yeah.
Yeah, on the lead investor part, I think it is indeed the case, but in my experience, it has always been the case. So you have lots of followers. So it's always this chicken egg chain as well, right? You get this lead. Sometimes some powerful business angels can step in as a lead if they have this qualified background, and that can actually help set the terms for all the followers, and then basically push back this problem for the other bigger round in the future. But yeah.
Thanks. Maybe Adèle, I know that in the scope of ESN, you have several national promotional agencies. Do you also collaborate with investors, and what is your role on this topic?
Yes, indeed, we collaborate with investors. And to also answer your first question, in the European startup ecosystem, indeed, the access to funding varies at different growth stages. And generally, what we observe is that startups indeed face challenges in raising funds, and particularly true in the early stages. And indeed, in Europe, there's a growing number of angel investors, of seed funds, but the availability of larger funding rounds can be limited. And all startups, from my experience, often struggle, to secure sufficient funding due to the demand-offer gap, as you have mentioned, where the demand for investment exceeds the available capital. So in other words, there are more startups seeking for funding than investors willing and ready to invest. And this creates a competitive environment for the startups where they have to fight for limited funding opportunities. So this is why the role of accelerators and our role also the European Startup Network is very important, because we make startups aware of the funding conditions, of the funding opportunities, also we help them to assess their innovation readiness, to build a convincing approach for investors, how to pitch in front of investors, etc., and especially target the investors they will be introduced to. That's very important, according to their needs. The right approach and the right follow-up is very important. So this is from my experience what I can indeed, I really think that the acceleration services, as Jana said, are very important here.
Thank you, Adèle. Indeed, there are what seems to result from our own analysis is that there are two gaps. The first one at the very early stage, for which, in many cases, the companies are not investor ready, and also from Series B on. And in particular, let's say, there are gaps in terms of amounts and the facility to raise funds between the ecosystem. But yeah, maybe we will get back to that a little bit later. Pranjul, what is your perspective on the access to funding?
I have to say, Luxembourg as an ecosystem is very young within itself. The economy minister, pushed heavily 5 years ago to diversify from the steel and the finance industries, and said we should attempt to become a startup nation. And since then, it has led to massive investments from the government within the health tech sector, within the university, within the space tech sector. And I think of all the different sectors that the government is trying to push, circularity, among others, space tech was one of the most successful ones. Now we have more than 300 companies, startups from all over the world who have landed in Luxembourg. And in this particular sector, clearly the funding is becoming very, very easy. Anything that touches upon space tech, so not necessarily just satellites, but anything with communications, coming with downstream applications, much easier to get funding. The LBAN as a whole, which was doing smaller tickets in the past, 50K, 100K here and there, have also since more kind of gotten a bit more organized. And because of the number of deals which are coming into Luxembourg, so we went from an ecosystem where we had about 50 startups to 550 within the span of 5 years. So that really pushed, the opportunities for investors. So a lot more hidden investors have actually come out. So a lot of more private money is actually flowing around in Luxembourg. We went from a situation where about 1.5 to 2 million was getting invested 10 years ago. Now we are investing more than close to 10 million last year or this year and earlier next year. So what is the situation is that already some of these successful entrepreneurs, so we have 3 major exits, where one was Talkwalker, second was At Home, the third one was Doctena. Just last week we announced a major Series B fundraising with Salonki, which if you don't know yet, is soon coming to your town, which is basically a platform for booking hair salons, basically for a next haircut or salon treatment. And they just raised 28 million. So this is really bringing investors to Luxembourg, and also the belief in the local business angel population that this is possible. You can get good, returns out of investing in startups. This has synergized in a way the whole ecosystem. These kind of good activities, and finally, that's why we have now a startups.lu, a startup association representing the startup community. So Adèle, if you're not yet in touch, I would like to put you in touch with Patrick Kirsten, who's actually one of the most serial entrepreneurs, or most recognized and well-known serial entrepreneurs in Luxembourg. We should have startups.lu on your slides soon, because I think that's something we really need to do as an ecosystem, is to start communicating and connecting with other ecosystems. So I think the early stage pre-seed is working well. Just last week at Viva Tech, the economy minister announced a 14 million euro fund, which was going to be part of an existing digital tech fund, which will invest in seed rounds in early stage ventures. So we're trying to sort out our seed level, investments, because this is something where we are struggling. I have to be honest. It's something which the angels kind of say, oh, well, our job is done, and then we don't have yet a thriving VC ecosystem. And the challenge there is that the local market is small. So VCs, as soon as they want to invest, they want to see either there is a plan to go to US, or they are expanding within Europe. And this is where the challenges are, because for many sectors that Luxembourg startups are engaging in, expanding in Europe is not really the easiest route. And going to US, then the European investors are always thinking, well, if you're moving there, we're not too sure if you want to be in this round. Maybe when you are raising the Series B or you're coming back, let us know. So that's where Luxembourg startups face a little bit of challenge. But the Luxembourg government with the European, EIF, EIB, they're working on the Lux Future Fund. So this is currently open, and they are actually raising capital for this fund. When it comes into play, this would be a massive funding because they're talking about 100 million plus in we invested in the next 10 years in Luxembourg. And this includes all sectors, and the ticket sizes from 500,000 to 2 million, which is really the right spot where we are missing currently support for the startups to grow. So I think as an ecosystem in 5 years, we've done a good job in kind of maturing the way we are investing and supporting our startups. And I think the way things are within the next 2 to 3 years, we believe that the landscape will evolve as well. What is also exciting is a lot of European venture funds are actually starting to also move towards Luxembourg. And I think this was kind of good to see, because I don't know if you know, but this is also sometimes news because I tell everybody, but there is a conference where all VCs, all 600 to 700 VCs, they come to Luxembourg for 2 days. And the conference actually is called, and I'm not joking, it's called the Ugly Duck Conference. They all fly into Luxembourg from the airport to go to the EIF, and they leave the next day and out. They don't even venture or talk to anybody in the Luxembourg ecosystem. So we are really pushing as with the Ministry of Finance and the EIF, saying, why don't these guys spend a day talking to the people in the ecosystem? And we're really trying to slot ourselves in a bit in their agenda, so we can talk about hey, don't just come in to Luxembourg, invest in Luxembourg. These are the kind of events which are in the pipeline. And we believe that in the coming years, things will definitely get better. And I mean, as history goes by, startup ecosystems mature when people make exits, because they are the best investors for the next funds, and they know how to raise funds and they have to bring investors. And this is exactly the kind of we want to create in Luxembourg, and it's starting to happen. So this is good signs.
Thanks, Pranjul. David, maybe the situation in Ireland, and I will also anticipate on the next question. Do you see any gap within your ecosystem with respect to other European ecosystems, meaning that the amounts at the same growth stage are larger or smaller, and also with respect to other international ecosystems, US and Asia in particular?
We have significant investment here from state agencies. So Enterprise Ireland invests in our startups as they go out. So they do this, first of all, to the pre-launch commercialization fund, which can be very substantial, but that's not equity related, and the company at that point hasn't been formed. After they start, Enterprise Ireland is one of the investors of first call. They can take a percentage of your company, they can do convertible loan notes, that sort of stuff. There's some EIB investment. It's not as significant. It's interesting when I see it here, how the EIB is investing in some of the examples that were shown by Pranjul there. It was quite interesting for me to see that. We don't tend to go after that funding. We tend to go after, I would say, successful entrepreneurs who've exited, who remain in Ireland. That tends to be an early angel investment, early seed phase. And then after that, we have some VCs who invest, but we certainly, it is not as common here for the later stage investment in particular. So we have some early stage seed investment, angel investor, that's quite common, but there's a big gap for the deep tech solutions to go on, because even to get to a Series B in a deep tech, some of our areas, you can literally be talking 80 million, 50 million, and you might not even have a real product at that point. It's the way those companies work, which is kind of hard to square off when you see some other companies who are already selling something when they get invested almost, So it's a very challenging environment for our startups. And what I would say, if you look at the history of our startups, there's a few that have traded for a very long time and then were acquired, but there's a large number who have never really sold a product and were acquired. And in Ireland, we don't tend to continue those companies on. So that's kind of the gap for us, is that we don't have enough of investment community to support the larger companies. So they end up just being acquired typically. And then, for example, we look to Germany and see how many of these companies that are 10, 20 years old, they have had investment, but they haven't gone public. They've, chugged along. They might even have 1,000 employees now. That just is not common in Ireland. And that's where we're trying to address that, try and make more of our own system here. And I think, so in short, we don't have a ton of money at the early stage, but we have some. But at the later stage, when it starts getting to the really deep tech stuff, where it's big money, that's not common.
Thank you, David. Jem, maybe on your side, what is your perception of this gap? Do startups in Europe, and in particular in your ecosystem, raise more or less money than in other ecosystems, European or international?
So I can only agree with David shared just before. Maybe to complement this, I would first start with the sort of a value of depth that I was showing in slide. This is something that I think all investors can observe. You can have first the money from well, the love money that we call, then some angels, but then as soon as you need to go from pre-seed up to late seed, then you start having this gap where there's this chicken and egg that I was mentioning before. One thing that I was also thinking of is, of course, when you, at least on our side, when we talk to startups from in the US or in Israel, even in the UK, you have a distortion of what's the capital available on the market versus the rest. So if we talk about Italy, Spain, sometimes France, but same goes with the Baltics, eastern part of Europe. So the valuation is also quite linked to the capital available on the market, and we can see the gap between different regions. And last but not least, it's a bit different, but when it comes to the female teams raising funds, so we can also see a gap. We talk a lot with male-driven team. So I would be actually curious to hear later on from the formal founders' perspective on this. But on our side, we have difficulties in seeing female, founding team. Maybe it's because of the nature of the segments that we are and verticals that we are involved with, that are a bit more mathematical, engineering driven. So that applies a filter plus the entrepreneur experience. But this is for sure something that we have noticed with other investors on the market.
Thank you, Jem. Antonella, maybe you want to react to this?
Yeah, happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Antonella from the Female Founders team, running the startup program at Female Founders. And yes, we're supporting gender diverse teams with at least one female co-founder in there. And it is a super, like Jem, I totally see you. It is a super tricky question, unfortunately. There's not like this one major problem that we need to tackle, but it's like so many systematic things that need to change and evolve over time. I also do think in the space that you're operating in, there's a lot of educational approach that we need to focus on to also build a pipeline of more gender diverse startups in there. Nonetheless, I also do think, and this is something where we really focus on, it is not only about educating the startups and female entrepreneurs on the topic of building a venture and raising funds, but it's also the VC side that definitely needs to adjust and recognize certain bias within their processes and within their thinking to open up also their bubbles and investor versa. And one very typical example that I always love to give, especially kind of in the beginning of the whole topic, is just looking at how a lot of VCs come to an investment decision. What you really want to see of the founders is that the founder is getting recommended by a lot of people in your network that you're trusting. And there you have the whole network effect in there that is a high barrier for a lot of underrepresented groups, not only female founders here as well. So I do think, and coming back also to today's topic, what I truly believe is that partnerships and collaborations open up the space to get new views and to see new deal flow and to get access to new networks and platforms and deals at the end of the day as well. And I do think that also what we at AccelerAction are actually building up with the platform, with the mapping, this will also allow in earlier stages to already, reach the goals that you have, which should be also gender diversity, but also probably other goals that you are setting for yourself and for your portfolio. I hope that already gives a little bit of insights. Then I'm also happy to talk a bit later about it.
Thanks, Antonella. Jana, maybe your perspective. You are positioned as well as deal room, I would say, to have the overall statistics about the amounts raised, the follow-up. Can you give us some insights from your EuroQuity?
Thank you. Maybe I would like to mention we did in AC Scaling Up project, we did a blueprint where we, in the project, we select 37 deep tech European companies in three topics, health, digital, and sustainability. And we did the research blueprint, what are the main challenges for them to raise funds. And yeah, of course, the first one was the lack of European lead investors. It's the main issue for them to find the lead investors. Then there was another a lot of challenges that they are facing the companies, but this I would like to mention, like how we cooperate in the project and how we did like a support of companies. So we organize in the first stage of the project, we connect them with mentors and coaches for 1 year. And together with this, we did a massive campaign, PR. We organized roadshow activities, events, and networking events, pitching sessions to support these deep tech companies to find investors. And project end at May. It's June now, so we are starting the second round. But I would like to say that we reach our KPIs in the project in December. So it means that 5 months before the end of the project, we reach our KPIs. So the companies raise more than 100 millions. So I think it is especially when or how to help the companies. It's really to do the support, coach them, teach them, introduce them with investors, and organize as well the PR activities for supporting these companies.
Thank you so much, Jana. Do you see any bias between males and female founders from the statistics that you have?
Yes, we can see this and especially our experience. Maybe I will share more our experience, what we have during our pitching session. We always try to select the companies at least to have, you know, from it is not possible to select from I don't know how many companies, to select 8, that we will have half of them lead by women. It's not possible because they are not applying. Maybe we can select 2 or 3, the best one, of course, and we are trying to give them the possibility. But sometimes they are telling us, I don't want to present. I don't want to do the presentation. And I don't know, it is maybe because the women are not so confident. I don't know. I don't know, but we are trying to support them much more as a men companies, because sometimes they need it. But yeah, we can see this gap, and especially in some specific sectors, as deep tech companies in, I don't know, in digital, in conductors, on some AI, it's usually men.
Thanks for sharing that, Antonella. Yes.
Yeah, I have to challenge that because I strongly disagree. From all our 250 applications for each batch, and we are running the batch twice a year now, changing to 4 times a year, and 250 female-led companies per batch, and AI is obviously one of the strongest one in there. So Jana, if I may, I would actually like to challenge a couple of things that I think a lot of companies have to also change, and also a topic where we do consult companies on, but it's also a lot about the processes that you have, the way how you present yourself, the way how you also show your portfolio companies, and the things that you're offering to the founders. When it comes to female founders, you also have to kind of consider where they're coming from. As soon as they start with the idea of having a startup, not even, you know, like really incorporating it, but just like, hey, do you think I have an idea that I want to work on full time as a co-founder? They immediately confronted with negative associations about their gender. So also coming from their perspective, I do think that a lot of companies, especially accelerators, this is our job to make sure, okay, what are the offers, the services and the support they need to overcome this challenge that is in most of the time slowly external. I do not agree with the comment that it's about an internal insecurity of not pitching, but knowing from so many female stories about, hey, I had so much fun pitching and suddenly I got the weirdest questions and the weirdest feedback on my gender. Of course, the next founder won't be that excited anymore. So I do think that it's a way bigger picture that we have to consider. And that's of course not always you and your position, the one who will change the world immediately. And it's not your job only to do so. But I do think that we also have, when it comes to gender, I do think we have to stop with those stereotypical comments of associating women with being not confident and recognize that all the processes and the structure that we have in the VC world are highly to criticize for those gender diverse startups. And just also highlighting here, because I'm talking about gender diverse startups, because as soon as there's also a female co-founder in the team, also the male co-founders will see the struggles, and they will have to also confront with those struggles and become those allies that the female movement is looking for, right? So I do think also when it comes to the whole topic, we should never ever exclude the male co-founders in this conversation, because this is also their burden. And at the same time, this is also the opportunity how we could actually move forward with the conversation and increase the numbers of only 2% investments in female-led companies. And I think it's about 8% in gender diverse companies, while 90% still going to male. So sorry for interrupting, Jana.
No, thank you very much.
Again,
I have to only agree. I have to only agree with you. But what I mentioned, it was only one example. What I really have my personal experience. When I was selecting the companies for one pitch session, we select as well woman-led company co-founder. I call her. I spoke with her, and at the end, she didn't show up during the presentation. I don't know why. Only her colleague, he was there, and he presented the company. And I think it is a pity, because I think it should be you know, the better when a woman is presenting the company, especially when she is a co-founder and she knows everything about the company. So it's only experience what I had, but of course we are organizing especially the pitching session dedicated to women-led companies, or we also organize the investor office hours for women-led companies when we make the first connection with investors. So we have some products for women-led companies. We are coaching them, we are supporting them as well. But this was only the experience what I had, you know, like so. But thank you very much, and I totally agree with you what you said, that during this discussion it should be every time it should be as well men's involved. And another maybe just personal experience. I was on AEC Summit last year in December in Brussels. There was a panel discussion how to support better women-led companies, and there was 5 women. They were speaking about the topic, and in the audience there was only 2 men, and full audience was only women. So I think this should be changed. Yeah.
What I wanted to say in more simple terms is if you have in your cohorts female founders who have confidence problems, please send them to Antonella, and this will be solved very easily.
We get them ready for you.
Absolutely. Adèle, your perspective on these financing gaps?
Yes, Paul, thank you for asking. So indeed, I will share again here from my point of view, from my experience, in comparison to some other EU and international ecosystems. The reality is indeed that the European startup that we support, at least indeed, face a gap in terms of the amounts raised and valuations. The ecosystems in the United States, for example, are different, and they often see larger funding rounds and higher valuations. And to give you an example, in the frame of one of the projects I worked on, I have been a lot in touch with US mentors and startups, and the approach is different. The amounts that are asked are higher, and there are certain aspects also of business that need to be more emphasized, such as, among other things, market potential, traction, scalability, global expansion, to appeal actually to the US investors who are maybe more accustomed to larger funding rounds, to higher valuations. And I think that there is an availability of capital there and the willingness of the US investors to take on higher risks. And on the other hand, European startup ecosystems, while they are rapidly growing and evolving, they might face relatively smaller funding rounds and lower valuations. And this can be attributed to several factors. It can be that there's a smaller pool of venture capital firms, maybe a more cautious investment approach as well by European investors. It might also include some cultural, regulatory differences that influence investment decisions and valuations. But this is indeed the case from my experience as well. And in terms of, just I want to share, to give a few numbers from our European Startup Monitor regarding the male and female founders. Just a small addition here is that indeed, unfortunately, 64% of teams in startups are all male teams, and only 7% are all female teams, and 29% are mixed teams composed of males and females. I just wanted to add that. So this is indeed a concern and needs to be addressed. And I really like to follow the discussion between Anya and Antonella. Indeed, this is one of the biggest concerns. And I agree with your points, Antonella.
Yes, with respect to that, I had an interesting discussion with the Digital SME Alliance, who said we need to address the root causes and understand what people want and not the figures necessarily. They are only a consequence. And then with respect to what you've mentioned, and your experience, your feedback with respect to that all is welcome. To what extent the amounts raised in the US are grounded to the reality. I was discussing with a startup in Bulgaria making 2 million yearly revenues, and they were trying to raise 10 million. It was almost impossible. They said they had a competitor in the US who raised 20 or 30 million, I don't know, without even having let's say a first client. This will probably not be true anymore today due to the current, let's say, challenges. But yeah, I think that in many cases, as you've mentioned, Adèle, the risk appetence may be a little bit higher in the US and the habits different. To conclude on this, Pranjul, maybe your perspective, and I will also anticipate to the next part. We will skip probably the poll because we are running out of time, let's say. In addition to the access to the, let's say, funding and situation in Luxembourg, how is the access to markets and the relation to raising funds in your ecosystem?
Yeah, so I have to say, like as I said already, the scaling up is always a challenge in Europe, and I think Luxembourg is no different. And that was the reason why we built an acceleration program for taking over startups to Israel, and then for 2 weeks to US. So there we partner locally with the universities there. So we have University of North Carolina and MIT as partners to basically open their ecosystems to our startups. This year we did also addition on the West Coast. We started partnering with Stanford and Santa Clara. And this kind of having local partners really helps a lot for our startups when they go there and visit. Because at the end of the day, you need to create a trail of few first introductions. And from there on out there, things start to work, because there too, like the investor ecosystem are fairly small. In Israel, we work with the University of Tel Aviv University and Technion, so we also try to use and leverage the network. What is challenging, and I think I agree completely with your final kind of closing summary, was that indeed our startups, they're too humble and naive in some senses, because when we go and we took our startups to, I think they faced in the last, so earlier this month, we were there for 2 weeks, and practically every investor they pitched to, they said, you will need at least 10 times more. Why are you raising this much? People asking for 300K, we were offered even 12 million. So we have term sheets now in the tune of 1 million plus up to 12 million that we're negotiating with for our startups in the US. And it was very surprising, because what we tend to often our startups don't realize that they are way mature than most startups who just with an idea raise a lot. So I think this acceleration using funding from US, and then the vision that it takes to raise there, it's not about what you have as a technology. It's not about the team at all. It's all about how big your vision is. And that's where, because it's a misconception. Every investor we talked to in the US said, there's not going to be any decrease in the amount of deals. We're actually going to invest more, because right now we can get stake for half the price than we could last year. So, and we still have the same amount of funds that we have raised, which we need to deploy. So actually there is a bit of a temporary gap, but by the end of the year, they expect even more deals than last year. So this was a unanimous feedback from most investors in the US. So that's something European startups as a whole have to be aware of, not to stop their plans and going to the US if that is part of their roadmap to go and still raise funds, because you will have much better resonance at this time, because they would actually like European startups more. And this is resonant also in the fact that last week we had this amazing fundraising, 150 plus in France of ex-Google founders, which is with just an idea. I mean, it's still an idea, and it just shows that there is an interest in investing in Europe even more now, because they have seen success stories. I think Luxembourg as a whole, and just kind of conclude here, is in an interesting situation, is because we kind of host all your innovations, because most of the companies in all of the European ecosystems and US, they have the holding companies in Luxembourg. So if you look at the innovation index, Luxembourg is almost among the top, but we know the ground reality, because we just get your patents. We don't get actual companies. We don't have jobs and people actually working in Luxembourg. So that's actually a problem that we have, because when we were applying to the European, funding programs, Luxembourg always is a high to, ranked high in the innovation ecosystem, which is actually not true. It's just because the matrix are based on the number of patents that are filed here and the high-tech companies that we host here. But those high-tech companies hire 1 people or 2 people, often just their accountants, not really the tech people. So that's actually a problem that we as an ecosystem have, that we really need to change and lobby a lot more to the European Commission. But it's a double-edged sword. We want to be among the best ranked so that people will put their money here. But then we also want to showcase that there's a lot to do, and we need money to actually improve the ecosystem. So that's something we have to figure out.
What can you say about the access to market at the different, in particular at scale-up stage in Luxembourg and in Europe?
So this is good for us. Again, I think this is where having companies like Amazon, PayPal, Google, having the headquarters in Luxembourg, and then more and more coming in the coming days is helpful. This really provides us access directly to the leadership. So you have often the CFOs connects sitting in Luxembourg, but this is also in very niche sectors. It's not across the board. So it is a challenge if you want to access other markets. You don't have often the right connect points in Luxembourg. So that is why we are trying to solve this by making partnerships with different universities, because that's something we understand well. They understand our problems well, and they have solved the problem for their own startups. And if we can somehow figure out a way to collaborate with this, professors who are promoting innovation and they're active within their ecosystems, they have so far solved for the small volume that we have. I think when our volumes will grow, the challenges will of course change. And as a whole, of course, in Europe, our startups still tend to suffer and struggle. Growing in Europe is still a challenge, and I think it's not. We don't have a solution yet, and I think that's something we really need to continue discussing among ourselves, how we can do a better job.
Thank you, Pranjul. David, maybe in Ireland, the ecosystem is also small. What can you say about the access to market conditions and basically the scale-up stages for your companies?
I think that's one of the best things about being, I suppose, a small country is that the one thing that we have supercharged, I suppose, is our export and access to markets. Because of the nature of Ireland, where majority of the leading tech companies, the leading pharma companies, leading biotech companies are all here. They're all headquarters are here, or their place of operations. And it's real as well. So, for example, Apple have 6,000 employees in Cork, and Cork is not a very big place. Intel is here near Dublin. Meta, all these organizations are here. So, and starting from the local level, we have access to those organizations who themselves then, of course, have a wide-ranging access to the world, you know, from there on in. But we find that our companies almost exclusively are targeting Europe and America as a starting point. They don't start with a national market in mind. And because of that, we feel, I guess, automatically that we have avenues in front of us for European markets. So we don't feel there's any barriers for us. Possibly in part, it's sort of, you know, the mother of invention is the problem that we don't have people to purchase it here. So all of our deep tech startups start with that in mind. But we're also fortunate in the way that the government thinks that way too. So when you approach the two major government bodies, Enterprise Ireland is the one that people would have heard about, and the IDA. The IDA is the foreign direct investment body, which brings companies in to Ireland. But they also provide us an avenue out. So we go to events such as Photonics West, which is the largest photonics, everyone would know that here, the largest photonics trade show. But Ireland punches above its weight. We are recognized when we're there. So we have meetings with organizations that, for our size of our startups and size of our companies, are disproportionately impactful. And that's because of the networking of Irish politicians and Irish organizations around the world. So from ourselves, I would say targeting in Ireland as a market isn't the way to go necessarily, although we're very happy to buy your products and services. But for ourselves, we look outwards always. Well, and if any company is setting up in Ireland, I will say this, I should have said that. If anyone comes to set up in Ireland, there's enormous supports for it. And I mean that beyond taxation, I don't mean that. The government in Ireland is, because we see it as a spin in to spin out. So if you want to come to Ireland to get access to those networks, it is really favorable. So for startups coming here, and we're not possessive, we're not trying to grab that startup to make it Irish. That's not the point of it really. We understand that they go to a certain size. So if anybody has, within the entire European family in particular, a lot of companies come into us to get the support of our infrastructure, but also the governmental support because of that network. Ironically, they could be a small fish in a big country where it's hard to make an impact sometimes. They come to us, they're maybe a little more impactful, they have a little more profile. Very similar that was saying about speaking to the Prime Minister one day. We're not at quite that level in Ireland. It's not as easy as that, but because of our national politics, for example, the Prime Minister was from Cork until recently. He switched now. He came to an event last week opening a collaboration with Meta. And we have really direct access to high-level politicians and policymakers here. And what that means for small companies is that they have a sort of a tangential way of getting in. And that it really, I would say to any organization or any company that wants to set an agenda or knows an agenda needs to be set, like Luxembourg, probably like Belgium, those kind of smaller countries, coming into us, we really are able to make the case for, especially for groundbreaking work, we can make the case directly with politicians and directly with people to make those decisions. So that allows us to, I guess, access those markets again through that way.
Thank you, David. Adèle, one of the great ideas maybe to help companies scale was the digital single market, or simply the single market. How are you basically working with the national startup associations to help startups find their, let's say, markets in Europe, grow? by leveraging the connections with the other ecosystems?
Thank you for your question, Paul. Indeed, as an introduction, I can say that the access to markets can be indeed challenging. And this is why we trigger, as you say, the expertise within our network, is that we know that our startups face challenges, definitely, in reaching customers across different technology readiness levels, from proof to concept to piloting and to commercialization. And they are regulatory and compliance complexities that can indeed delay or complicate the entry into a market, complying with industry-specific regulations, certifications, licensing requirements that can pose challenges, markets that can be fragmented, market entry barriers that really impede startups in their ability to gain traction and to secure customers. And this is where, as the European Startup Network, with a strong network and strong partnerships within the European ecosystem, that we trigger and curate actually the best expertise. This is what allows us to curate the best expertise for our startups needing guidance and advice in this regard.
Thanks, Adèle. Jana, from your side, how are the companies that are raising funds through EuroQuity growing in Europe? What is let's say, what are the challenges related to the access to market? And I also anticipate the next topic, which is what other resources do you consider essential to support the scale up of these companies?
Thank you for the question. For the French ecosystem, I would say like the main target is of course EU and maybe Germany, Belgium, because of similarity of the same language. So for the French companies, is that this is the target market with when they are trying to expand. Access to the market is very difficult for, I think, for every company when they are trying to start a business. So it's when I see the discussion with investors, this is also the main topic what investors are asking. Like, what is the go-to-market strategy, how they identify the market, and how they will enter. So this is the one of the challenges what the companies are always asking from investor side. So it's really important that companies are prepared with this phase. Sorry, what was the question?
What other resources are essential?
Yeah. So I wanted to say, like, this is also important that companies can have a support from public institutions, supporting them in internalization with export and another possibilities. In Bpifrance is a department for export as well, but there are another organizations as Business France or another networks supporting companies to access with different markets. I would mention maybe TAFTI, Network of Innovation Agencies, or EEN Network. But I would like to as well mention that as well incubators and accelerators, they should have international partners and to be a part of these networks to help as well their partners to expand internationally.
Thank you, Jana. So Adèle mentioned the regulatory conditions, the difference in cultures among the, let's say, European ecosystems. I was also referring to resources such as talents, infrastructures, or specific support services. Do you consider that in France and also in the other ecosystems you work with, companies have specific challenges? A lot of them are mentioning, for example, not being able to find the right talents to in the scale-up phase in particular.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges what we are always listening from startups, that access to talents is very challenging for them. Maybe I would mention in France, Bpifrance has two applications or platforms for searching talents for DeepTech companies, DeepTech startups, is Tandem and Tango. One is for DeepTech startups, just very early stage when scientists are looking for co-founders or for business people, I can say. Startup or researcher can upload a job offer and via this platform they can have access to the resources. And Tandem, this was Tandem, and Tango is just for advisory. It's very similar for advisory boards. So when startups are looking the talents in France, they can use these two platforms. And internationally, yeah, I think this is also a part of public institution. They will help them with regulatory, with law, with all these administrative details. I know that the Bpifrance is doing the same for startups coming to France. So there is as well the possibility to support startups with these challenges.
Paul,
Thank you, Jana.
Please,
David.
I should have said this, and it's something that I think for any of people here, actually, I think it's interesting. This development of the EU pilot lines, I would say for anybody involved in startups, even in scale-up phase, the pilot lines are a great place to approach for people who are looking either to leverage funding, and a lot of these pilot lines in their earlier phases have co-funding, and that's sort of at the start, and that's mainly targeted at startups. So I'm involved in two, or I was involved in one PICSAP, which is now, the project is finished, but PICSAP pilot line is ongoing. That's for photonics packaging. And that's for organizations who, it's really expensive to do packaging. So you approach them, the network is very distributed. So it's very difficult for a smaller company and even larger companies to get packaging made in photonics. The rules are difficult. And so you go to someone like PICSAP and they'll connect you. I'm also involved in MedFab. And I think this is more appropriate than what was being said about regulation. So MedFab is a biophotonics pilot line. So basically medical devices with light integrated into them. And what it was there and what it's there now, we set up a non-profit at the end of it it's not finished yet, but we've set it up already that it will continue on. And what it is that people can approach this really distributed group of big organizations, research organizations and companies. And for example, the companies involved are Stryker, Philips Innovation Services, Jabil, really big companies. And organizations like IMEX, CSCM, Tyndall, Fraunhofer, they're all in there. And when you're a startup and you want to try and get funding, one of the challenges in the biophotonics or medical device space is that everybody knows that you need a lot of money, and everybody knows you would not have a regulated environment realistically in your organization. It's probably not worth it to you at the start. So when you approach things like these pilot lines like MedFab, they make your demos for you, for your investors. They make a small run or a set of prototypes cost effectively, but most importantly, in a regulated environment under the ISO 13485 in medical, for example, or just in the normal ISO standards. So for a startup or someone looking to scale up in the bio space, if you approach someone like MedFab, in reality, it's a direct contract with Stryker or Philips or Jabil or ourselves, and we're not regulated environment, but the other ones are, and they'll make you your device in that. So it allows these startups and scale-ups to skip that step of having to get regulated in advance of knowing that anybody wants to buy this thing. And I think that's the environment the European Union has provided that is an enormous help for these organizations to step forward. And the people who approached us in our open calls, which were co-funded, and they've ended now, but we're all SMEs of the S of the SMEs. They're essentially, all but one was tiny. And they came to us and they said, we're looking for investment. We want to scale up. We want to show our product works and can work in a regulated environment and be made within that structured environment. And MedFab and mainly these organization companies said, you can't make it that way. You can't use that material in the scale up. You can't do that when you're trying to make it a mass manufacturing. It's impossible. And they help them make it in a way that when they approach now their investors, the investors are more confident in them to say, well, you've made 10 demos, they work, great starting point, but also it's made from materials and with processes that actually can be made in the regulated environment in Europe, which is probably the starting point for most of them, even before the US. So I would advise anybody here who has, there's so many pilot lines, but I'm involved in 2 only, but there's so many of them, that if you're really in that phase where you want to get demos made, investment made, or advice, I would say approach the pilot lines. And if you want to approach me afterwards, I'm happy to help any of your bio companies. Some of them have money and some of them don't, but it will help you. And for myself, I learned so much working in MedFab, realizing how these device master records work when you work, you know, they can actually walk away with a book and approach a mass manufacturer and say, this is the blueprint, this is the regulated blueprint. If I get 10 million, how much will it cost you to make 100 of these, or 1,000 of these, or 10,000 of these? And I think that for me, these are really greasing the wheels of Europe. I think they're a somewhat underused, underappreciated resource. I would say to anybody in any country, anywhere in Europe, if you want some help, approach a pilot line. They probably know how to do it, or they know someone who knows how to do it.
Thank you, David. Antonella asked if you could share a link to the pilot line you are involved in. From my perspective and what I've seen, it's basically one of the issues is the complexity and the visibility of such initiatives. There are tons of them between the digital innovation hubs, the pilot lines, the important projects of common interest, including the one on microelectronics. So in particular, SMEs and startups don't have the time to navigate through those. And this is one of the things that we are trying to address. You will see during the next discussion, the conclusion, basically what we are trying to achieve and how you can contribute to that by also making visible what you can offer. I think this is one of the problems. And the second that has been reported is that not all these infrastructures are playing the game and giving access to SMEs and startups. For example, in the case of EPSI, the blockchain infrastructure, some of them try to access the resources, and it was so complex that they've abandoned ultimately. I don't know what is your experience with the collaboration with startups and SMEs, if it's smooth, simple, but in some cases it doesn't seem to be so easy.
And my personal thought, what I've learned from working with a European pilot line is that the European side of it can be quite bureaucratic. And what I mean by that is when it's co-funded at that stage, when you are spending European money, there's a lot of oversight, and correctly so, because in a network of so large, you want to make sure that the companies that are getting this free European money, you know, it's above board, it's following state aid rules, it's not just part of someone's friendly network. So I understand that part. And I think that might be where the startups and SMEs who are coming into the processes first encounter a pilot line. And they say, well, I had to fill in an NDA, then I had to fill in multiple NDAs for somebody else, then I had to fill in a proposal form, then I had to get reviewed by that, then I had to fill in the full proposal form and a costing, and then they reviewed my costing, and then 6 weeks later I got a yes or no. And I think that's where their first experience of it is. But after that, I would say that that's free money. So I suppose there's a there's a little bit of give and take. Subsequent to that, I would say that has been what we have been concerned at in MedFab, as being making it a single point of contact, because we've all experienced it. We've all been at the other side of it, trying to work with these pilot lines. I was in MedFab structurally wise, and I would have to put my hands up and say it's Philips, or have really been the driver of this, have been streamlining the process. We have a single point of contact. We have one NDA to fill in. We have one proposal form now. It is reviewed, and then you get your project. But that might sound straightforward, but there's 18 partners, and that has been from the back end. That has been very hard to manage. I would say that there's a level of complexity in this that I don't think you can administer out entirely, unfortunately. And I know small startups have to keep running; they don't have time for this. So I think it's a really interesting conversation, and I think this is a brilliant thing you said, because I'm going to bring it back in to our own discussions right now, because we've only just launched a nonprofit at the start of the year as the follow-on to the project when it ends next year. And I think that's something that we haven't had that feedback from people, because the feedback so far is, thank God I got some free money. That's what they've been saying, or the support has been brilliant. But of course, that's because they haven't had to pay full commercial rates yet. And I think that's when the rubber will hit the road. But we've been thinking about it to make it streamlined for ourselves, actually, to make it cost effective. But I hadn't. It's been a brilliant thing to say, because I'm going to go off and bring that back in. I know myself when I try to navigate this world, I've found the fact that they all do something slightly different frustrating. Everyone does it slightly different. Fabulous does it different. Jetpix does it different. They're not all pilot lines, but they're all sort of pilot line. They all do it differently. And I can imagine if you're an SME with 4 people and 1 business person and you're subcontracting a legal person, it's got to be frustrating. So I think this is a thing we should, maybe there should be, maybe I'm gonna think about it afterwards how to deal with this, but there probably should be a pilot line central area where people genuinely go to and say, could you please help me administer this minefield for me? So very interesting comment, and I'm going to bring that back in. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, David, for your experience. Pranjul, in your ecosystem and globally at the European scale, what do you consider to be essential as resource for scale up? And what are the gaps today from your perspective?
I think really the problem is for us is experience in general in the ecosystem. So I think what we notice very clearly and quickly is that you have angels who have been successful entrepreneurs, have connects with the 3 or 4 VCs that they can bring to the table. What we notice in general is that our entrepreneurs and the angels, they have not yet, there's like 5 people in Luxembourg who have ever raised money from VCs. The rest have all got money from family offices and the money that's parked here in Luxembourg. So that's the problem. That's really, in a nutshell, is where what we are struggling with, is that raising money from venture capital, like raising risk capital as a whole, is something that you just, it's like building muscle memory. You need to just practice, and or you have done it successfully and then you share the experience. But we lack that in the ecosystem. Just don't have that possibility to gain that experience. So we are now building actually. So we're looking for in the long term. So that's what I tell people. Like, ecosystems are not built over years; they are built over decades. And what we are trying to do as a university is actually we're flipping the equation. So we are saying let the whole world and the rest of Europe focus on building better entrepreneurs. We will solve our problem by making better investors. And this is something as a whole Europe is not doing enough. And that's what we are focusing on. So we're targeting actually a new program with the top 10 business schools in Europe, and to actually bring talented researchers closer to investors, because typically they are the ones, if they don't take the entrepreneurial route, they can still take the investor route, because that's something they understand well. They understand tech. They just don't understand, what they can do with tech. And they do want to work for the big companies, but not really go through the hard, way of going about it. So what we are building is actually an internship program or fast track. We call it the whole management, programs, like, trainee programs that the corporates had built. We are trying to build the VC training program for top tech talent, future top tech talent, and then hoping that they would become the future tech investors that Europe will actually have cultivated and created. So we're not looking for people from business schools who have not gone through the hard route of grueling PhD and building solid IP and research portfolio in Europe. But these are people who have actually gone through that, but then now thinking, how can I, help other people who I know well, because they come with very solid, research networks. They know people who are doing amazing, groundbreaking research who could be benefited by having the right investor say, hey, you know what? I want to work with you. What if I jump on your company as a CFO and we pitch it to my fund, kind of things. That's where we see the future will shape. That's what we are going for the next 5-10 years. That's our goal, to build this kind of ecosystem. And the fact is, if we can run this for 10 years, we would have at least 20 students per year, which have gone on and worked for some of the other VC. Suddenly we have 200 VC, kind of trainees, or eventually they've progressed into level where we could reach out to clearly. So that's how we're going to build the scale up, value for you.
So reaching, if I understood correctly, a critical mass in terms of serial entrepreneurs and people who know the scale up process and can help their peers. It seems to be a success story that that was mentioned during our previous conversations with ecosystems in Greece and Bulgaria in particular, as there are a few successful entrepreneurs who are strongly helping the ecosystem. And in France as well, Jana, I don't know if you are familiar with the Galleon project, but it's the founder of BlaBlaCar is in the group, and basically they are developing tools, blueprints for the entrepreneurs, and they are opening doors. They are offering coaching, mentoring, and opening doors for them. So from your perspective, Adèle, what other resources do you consider important in addition to the support that you've mentioned on the regulatory aspects? Sort of a standardization of the procedures at the European ecosystem?
So indeed, next to the other resources, that might be missing within the European ecosystem. So we talked about the funding, we talked about the market access. We also talked maybe, I would like to come back to the talent pool. Because indeed, the availability of skilled and specialized talent can be a challenge for startups in some European regions. And to access for startups talents that have specific expertise, especially in technical or more niche areas, can be limited and competitive. So this is definitely, an important thing. This, the fact to mention that startups in Europe face challenges related to talent acquisition and competition with larger counterparts. As large companies, well-established organizations, they have more resources, of course, they have more the ability to offer attractive compensation packages, the benefits, career advancement opportunities, etc. This is why I think it's really important, first of all, that the startups are aware of that, and that they also need to effectively communicate their vision. This is where they can make a difference, their culture, and this might be indeed impact positively the attraction and retainment of top talent.
Thank you, Adèle, for sharing this. Okay, I don't know if there are any particular challenges or, let's say, best practices that you have observed in your ecosystems that you would like to share before going to the conclusion and brainstorming session on the ways to connect, let's say, the ecosystems, showing you what we are trying to accomplish. Have we forgot anything that is vital for the scale up of deep tech companies in Europe? Okay, doesn't seem to be the case.
Maybe
yes,
indeed,
Adèle, please.
Very last thing on the fact that training and coaching, we mentioned it, but this is very important, especially in the case, as you mentioned, of deep tech projects, because this is quite a specific context. We know it because it's it's a context of research that often involves multiple stakeholders, university, laboratories, etc. And the players with an academic background, which is quite specific. This is why I think training and coaching, and to curate the right mentors and the right experts who can help the innovators to reach an investor readiness level, that's very important, because it's quite a specific mindset. I worked a lot in the frame of my projects with innovators, researchers, actually. And there is a need to really support them, not only in building the right business model, to build, a business plan, but also in the way of communicating and convincing the investors, and innovation stakeholders about their projects, which can be challenging, actually, to build a convincing convincing pitch and to sell themselves. That's one of the challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, the path from the lab to the market is one of the most challenging, in addition to the, let's say, typical tech, digital startups who also face their own challenges in scaling up in Europe. Okay, so let's say that we have escaped the split groups since the threshold that we have defined is not achieved, but we will have a common session where we will try to explain what we are trying to do basically in the scope of AccelerAction, and then see how we can also serve the purposes and the objective that you have set for your organization. Nika and Achilleas, I don't know if you want to help with the, let's say, the questions on this session. I will only take 30 seconds to present the global idea. The objective would be to allow the stakeholders, in particular accelerators, incubators, but also the startups themselves, to have a detailed mapping of all the organizations in different EU ecosystems and the services they offer, to be able to navigate very easily across the ecosystem according to their needs at different growth stages. So basically, we take every organization from the perspective of their prerequisites and condition to access the program. What are they looking for? And then what the outputs, what is expected at the, let's say, at the end of the support program. And based on those inputs and outputs, we are trying to make connections across the European ecosystem. So help startups and incubators, accelerators themselves to exchange startups and help them on their scale-up path, make it as efficient as possible. Achillea and Nika, I will hand the floor to you for the questions related to the approach that we could take for connecting better the European acceleration ecosystems.
Okay, well, I will leave the floor to ladies first. So Nika, we can go with the first question.
Sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat?
Can you go with the first question, or do you want me to start?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So hello everyone. So we'll continue with some questions, and we will discuss it openly. So the first question is: as long as many challenges and gaps have already been identified, do you think that if the different ecosystems, either in local, regional, or national level, cooperate together, do you think it's possible to overcome this kind of challenges? So what's your opinion about that? I don't know who want to.
I have to answer that for us.
Yeah, David, go. Yeah,
absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely. I think certainly for us, for me, this is really exciting. I've been to a number of events over time, and Nick, since I'm working with Nick, it's been fantastic. So for myself here, what I would say, and this is from a university perspective, so everybody's a different view, but from a university perspective and from a leading tech organization, to get involved in other people's networks. So we have a training program. We would love to be able to bring or to invite or to send our students, even virtually, to go into the networks of all these individuals here, to say, you know, we go back to the well, the same place every time, to bring in the same entrepreneurs that we know. For example, we have some less female entrepreneurs that have been successful. So we go back to them again, and I'm sure they're frustrated with being asked every year. And for us to have an access to other successful female entrepreneurs all around Europe, who are all there, I'm sure, to say, look, this is possible. We also have tons of facilities we can offer. That's great. But I'm thinking from what we would get out of it, to show you what our motivation would be, is that, you know, we don't have access necessarily to all these European investors. We don't have access to all these training programs. We don't know them all. These accelerators, incubators, really interesting stories from Luxembourg there. It's fun to hear them. It's, you know, we have the same stories that we tell. So I would say that there is an open door for organizations like myself anyway, where we're not, I don't see it as competitive. I don't see this as a competing thing. We run our own stuff. We're funded by the state. You know, we want to help anybody else do technical work, absolutely. But we also want to benefit from the friendships and partnerships and help join our advisory panels, tell us what to do, help us join your training programs, help us into your networks, and we'll let you into ours. There's no problem with that. I just see this really, that I think you have so much gold dust. I can hear it all here. People saying, oh, I was incubator group. It isn't about us joining that. It's about learning from it, how you've done it, how small countries have done it, how big countries have done it. And I'm sure that there are going to be acquisitions, collaborations, enabling activities. And certainly for a small country, when we have validation from a large, successful other organization, when we say to our funders, look, we've partnered up with these guys over in France, they've got 5 million from the French government, can we back that as well? It not only does it focus the mind, I think it creates new money for our organization. It allows us to go to our organization and say, look, you know, can we get new funds, because this incubator in France or incubator in Germany has said, if you have money, we'll work together. I really think there's a huge, it's not even just about the existing skills and existing resources. I really think these sort of collaborations can get new money from our government and other governments to do new things, whatever those things are.
Great, thanks for your input. Anyone else wants to comment on this? Do you think that there are this kind of collaborations that also David mentioned between different ecosystems in local, regional, or national level will help overcome these challenges? I don't know if there is anyone wants to mention that. Yeah.
I think we need to. We have some good existing programs in Europe which have done a great job, especially in the mentoring piece, because this is something was mentioned. So in the Nordics, they designed the GNOME program, which is a Nordic mentoring program, which is very, very successful, and they succeeded in bringing very experienced entrepreneurs who had made exits, who had created their own founders by founders fund, very close to potential deep techs at the university. So they realized that deep techs are struggling in their ecosystems. They don't find the right access to the market. They don't have opportunity to very quickly get exposed to the right investors early on. And they solved this problem by basically not only kind of building, so they built the CXO suite for them, and they did it across. They started out with one country, but eventually they said, no, the problem is actually across the Nordics, and they did a very good program. And I think now over the years, it kind of during COVID, it didn't really work well, so it kind of fizzled out, but they're now coming up with a second version of it. But this was very, very successful, and that led to a lot of good exits, and some of them I'm actually personally connected to. And these people are really interested in helping entrepreneurs. And I think we need to find those people in our ecosystems, and then somehow find a way to connect them across Europe. And I think that's something is the way to find, not only solve the problem of how we help startups to progress, but also how we can solve the problem of market access. Because entrepreneurs are successful in one market, they know everything about that market. So we could have our entrepreneurs provide or simplify market access to their ecosystem for other regions if they want to come to our region. But that's something that is not really happening as much as we would like. So we do on our own reach out to partners that we are aware of, but it's not like a directory. And that's something we can learn also, for example, from Startup Central. You go to Startup Central in Israel, there's like one page, and then every startup, every corporate, every scale-up, every investor, angel investor, every connector in the ecosystem is all on one common directory with their email address, LinkedIn, everything accessible. It's just so much easier and so much faster to just ping. And the best service they offer, I was there like 2 months back. If you ping any of our member on Startup Central and they don't respond, do let us know, because we're going to tell them, hey, you still want to be on the directory. That's how crazy they are about people in the community offering back to the community. And that's what we need within Europe. We see sometimes the regions tend to still compete a bit, and so I think we need to get past that. And the whole pay forward mentality is still not yet fully there. Everybody's like, but what's in it for me? But okay, there could be something in it for you down the stream, but what is it first you're bringing to the community? Let's talk about that first before you start putting up this wall saying, but how is my region going to benefit? You will benefit down the road. My first exit was in the US, so I'm kind of used to this paid forward mentality, because I was supported by a ton of people, all of whom just came forward because I was a Kaufman fellow. Everybody said, oh, you're from Kaufman, I want to help you. Oh, you're from Kaufman, I want to help you. And I was so surprised, and I was taken back when I came to Europe that I don't have this here. So very often people in Luxembourg find it extremely surprising that, I just connect them to somebody without having any expectations. And I'm like, yes, but why should I have anything to do with this project? You're doing a great job. I know somebody else who can help you in the challenge you're facing. I just want you guys to work together. But that's not the norm in our ecosystems. And I think that's where we are struggling. And I do believe, like panels like this, and us, we are the ones who have to solve this problem. So, I'll raise the first hand. If any of you have a startup which is struggling in your ecosystem and you want any access to my network, I'm just an email away. Or just ping me, and I'll try to get them 4 or 5 connections and introductions within my network, but also elsewhere wherever I can make it.
That's great, Pranjul. Yeah, totally agree. I totally agree with you. And I see that this kind of panels here, I didn't expect that, to be honest, from the beginning. And I see that because we are sharing different expertise, and right now also we are sharing good practices. And I think what will stay from this panel today is that I'm quite sure about that. There will be future collaboration between us. I see many of you are interested in what the others are doing. So I would say that this kind of initiatives could be from our project or for other projects. That's the best benefit that they can have, and I am quite sure that after this discussion here, we're going to have many collaborations together, because we see what you said. You see that different opportunities, different practices that the partners are using. So, Pranjul, thanks for that. And also, you mentioned the one case with Israel. To be honest, I didn't know that, and it was really surprising for me. But I think also Jana from Bpifrance, we're trying to do the same thing. It's their vision. Jana, I don't know if you want to add on this, because EuroQuity platform right now, it's considered as a very good and welcome the platform, that it works like one-stop shop. So Jana, I don't know if you want comment on that.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. We are trying to connect different ecosystems together, different stakeholders, companies, investors. Companies can do that. They can find not only investors or business support organizations, they can as well find partners in different countries, in different continents, I can say, because we are as well very involved in Africa. So EuroQuity is this platform, but of course we are doing different projects. One of these, what I described at the beginning, AccelerAction, we are trying to connect less connected regions with European hubs, to sharing knowledge, to sharing best practices, good examples, how to support better companies from their regions, and to build the bridges. And I think this is the best opportunity how we can do it, or the best way how we can do it, to share our knowledge and our expertise.
Okay, thanks Jana for that. I think we should run faster because okay. So Nika, do you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, I can, but I feel like you're doing a good job. So if you just want to feel free.
Okay, you should give me a break in a couple of questions. Anyway, thanks for that. Okay, so the next question is, what do you expect from collaboration with other accelerators, or let's say stakeholders that supporting startup? So what you can provide to them, and what you are expecting from them, and also if you can share any good practice, any good collaboration that you have with your other accelerators, or let's say in general other stakeholders of the ecosystem in the past. I don't know who wants to add on this. Adèle, maybe. I don't know if you collaborate with other stakeholders or accelerators in general, and if you are open in this kind of collaborations, and what you can provide.
We are definitely open, and I think there are enough opportunities for everyone, and that is really important to work together and to share best practices and to foster this collaborative spirit. What we do is that just to share the initiatives that we engage into. Of course, we engage into different events. We are active on different online platforms within the different communities. What I also like as an idea is exchange programs. I think that would be really interesting, because we do that less at the European Startup Network, but to be able to enable the accelerator leaders, the mentors, and even the startups to spend time at other accelerators in Europe. That would be, I think, very interesting, because then it would allow, of course, not only the sharing of expertise, but also building the networks, building the relationships. I mean, we have, of course, to see what does it imply, what are the concrete implications, but I find the idea very interesting. I mean, of course, next to, as I said, to having partnerships with different stakeholders, as we do already, next to participating in different initiatives, collaborative research projects, etc. I think having something more hands-on, practical, as the exchange programs, for example, that might be interesting. But definitely open, and I agree with Pranjul. I liked what he said also. Is he still here? Yes. That indeed there are enough opportunities for everyone, and I think we should share our knowledge and work together actually to make the European ecosystem better and stronger.
Yeah, just to say that this idea of exchange of startups between accelerators, it's a very good idea. Should consider that also, because you know this project will also be used as a interactive map of the different accelerators. So when this will be finalized, then maybe we can use also this visualization or make this exchange that you already mentioned. So yes, that's a very good idea. I don't know, David, Jana, if you want to mention on that, if you are open to collaboration with other accelerators, let's say, what you can offer, and if you can share any good practice.
Well, we definitely are open. In terms of offering, we have very easily accessible training facilities here. So we, because of our fab, we have a training fab. So we not only have fabrication facilities for semiconductor fabrication, we actually have a training fab where you can go in, which is very rare to have access as a student to that sort of facility. Also, we have packaging. So we have Professor Peter O'Brien, who runs PICSAP, is a world leader in photonics packaging, and he allows training or has training programs as well on site. But in addition to that, we just have a load of postdocs and postgrads who are really open and willing to work and collaborate, and PIs working to collaborate with these individuals and these accelerators to join and support startups based here and based there. So we're just with people, and we have facilities, and we're very open to it. Even just having our experts go and join and teach at your courses to help, and vice versa.
Okay, that's more than welcome. I don't know, Jana, if you want to comment or want to go to the next question?
We are as well open for cooperation and sharing knowledge, but
I'm sure
we
about
can go ahead.
Okay. So the next,
maybe yes, Achilles, maybe we can close up the idea, let's say, because we are approaching the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there are more.
I know we've prepared a lot of questions, but we are approaching the very end, and the idea would be to present in 30 seconds as well the conclusion and the next steps. Okay. I don't know if you want to close with a final question or
maybe there's one crucial question I would say. So how you choose, let's say, your partners? When I'm saying your partner, I mean the partners you collaborate together, or also when a startup needs a specific support. How you identify this kind of partners? Do you use any specific tools and specific networks? Let's go maybe Adèle. I think it's relevant to your case, this question. So in case a startup or your organization is looking for a specific expertise, how you find this, how you identify the potential partners?
In case a startup asks for support, and I like actually to provide fresh and new perspectives to them, what I do is, of course, I have a discussion with those startups because it has to correspond to their needs. I assess the current situation of the startups, their business needs, and where there is a gap, of course, and how to fill it in with the best expertise. And then I trigger my network, the network of the organization, in order to really tap into, the best expertise with very diverse people, diverse backgrounds, knowledge, etc. So this is what I do, but I think it really needs to start with really an in-depth discussion and assessment of the needs and of the goals and what they want to achieve, and to really be able to propose the right expert. This is more on the startup side, and within our ecosystem, within our network, we already have, we have a strong network with research innovation centers, accelerators, investors, large organizations, etc. And there again, according to the different projects we are in, European projects or other projects more in sometimes in the private sector as well, there as well, we assess the need and then see what would be relevant, what strategic partnership could add value to the network, could add value to our startups. And this is how we proceed. I mean, very shortly, because we just have not too much time, but this is the idea.
Okay, so I'm sure you're going to expand your network after today's meeting.
Definitely.
I'm sure about that. Okay, so what about, I don't know, David, Jana, one last comment on that.
It's interesting. Well, I think we don't have a strategic plan on who we approach actually when we do this. It's usually needs-based, and we have an existing network ourselves. That's what we go to, both here and in the US. But we're very open to sharing that network. We built it a long time in the US, especially in California. And so that's how we do it. We have an existing network of people we approach, and in Ireland, culturally, we tend to have good social relations with our networks. So we tend to build long-term partnerships. And then the idea is that those individuals, as they progress through their career, we benefit from that. It's not a particularly strategic plan, but it works for us.
Great, David. Jana?
And maybe just final words from my side. Bpifrance has a similar partners like as Bpifrance is in different countries. So we have more bilateral cooperation in Greece, in Belgium, very similar organizations. But the idea how we are making partnership, and it's very similar as Adèle said. So I would just to say, like, I agree with what she said, and we are doing very similar assessments for companies and as well for us in European projects.
Thanks, Jana. Paul, just one last thing I want to say to Adèle, because I know maybe we lost after that. I seen the national stakeholders that you are presenting in your presentation. Greece, I think, was missing. Just to let you know that there is a relevant organization in Greece. It's called Elevate Greece. It's actually the organization that all Greek startups belong to. So in case you want to also connect with them, just let me know. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Also include Greece also in your network.
So much.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Paul, Donieta.
Thank you so much, Achilles. Thank you all. You've been very brave, among the bravest, let's say, who survived until the end of the session. So I would like to thank you again for the very valuable insights. The plan on our side is basically we will have 2 additional meetings. The last one having the objective to present you the map, the network acceleration program that we are trying to build, and helping you use these tools to connect even better with peer ecosystems. Meanwhile, in particular, David, you will receive some emails from my side because I have suggestions to make. Adèle will have an action plan. Please, David, please.
No, fantastic. I was saying fantastic.
Thank you. So with Adèle, we already have an action plan. Jana, we have some cooperations that will probably grow stronger. But yeah, the idea is to put all our resources together and improve the impacts that we bring to the startups in our ecosystems. And we believe strongly that connecting and joining our forces can bring a true impact for the ecosystems that we represent. So thank you once again. I don't know if there is anything you want to say as final words on your side.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Adèle.
Fantastic.
We're very grateful for your participation, and we will stay in touch then.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone. I wish you an excellent day and see you soon.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.